Hello, people loved by Christ. Pastor Matt Clark here from Ascension Lutheran Church in South St. Louis, where we are reading through God's Word once again. Each year, we've had a different Bible reading challenge. We've read through all of God's Word in 2 years. We've read through the Psalms. We've read through the Gospels. This year, we're reading through the epistles, Romans through Jude. Uh, the New Testament epistles are simply letters. That's what the word epistle means, is a letter. And so these letters were written by individuals like Paul and John and Peter. And many times they're writing to a group of Christians in a certain city. For instance, Paul writes to the Christians in Corinth. And so we have the books of 1st and 2nd Corinthians, letters for them. But there's other times where they're writing to an individual. And so Paul writes, for instance, to Timothy, who's a young pastor. So we have 1st and 2nd Timothy. But whoever Paul's writing to, we have that context, but we also have our context today. These are words that are meant for us to hear too, that we can learn from, apply to our lives, that are meaningful for us today too. No doubt about it. So we are starting our reading with the book of Romans. I invite you to pick up a reading schedule in our church library. There's hard copies. It's also on our website, also in our news and notes as well, which you can access through our website. I invite you to join us as we read through the epistles. Again, we're starting with Romans. Romans is a book of the Bible that Martin Luther held in very high esteem. In fact, if you have a Lutheran study Bible, there's some notes from Luther at the very beginning where he talks about how he believes every Christian should commit to memory the book of Romans. Good luck with that. It is worth doing. That is a noble venture. Luther even takes it a step further and says that Christians should occupy themselves every day with the book of Romans, that it would be the daily bread for their soul. And so I invite you to do that, for all of God's word to occupy you every day, but especially in these coming weeks, be occupied with the book of Romans. Romans is a book where, at least for me, I'm reading it, and all of a sudden there's this verse that I know by heart, even that I've heard so many times, and I realize, oh, it came from Romans. One of those examples is Romans chapter 1, today's reading, begins verse 16, where Paul writes, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes, first for the Jew and also for the Greek." I'm not ashamed of the gospel. And you think of Paul's context where Christians very much persecuted, Paul himself in prison and beaten, tortured even for the sake of the gospel. He's not ashamed of it. May we have that same attitude, right? That in our context today, that we wouldn't be embarrassed because we're a Christian, that we wouldn't shy away from just simply telling people about Jesus, that we would never be ashamed of the gospel. God forgive us for those times when we are perhaps ashamed of the gospel, or try to hide our little gospel light, right? And keep it to ourselves. Do not be ashamed of the gospel. Why? Because Jesus isn't ashamed of you. And what a wonderful gift that is. Jesus could very well be ashamed of us, right? We have sinned in thought, word, and deed by what we've done, by the things we've left undone that we should have done. Jesus could be ashamed of us, but he's not. Instead, he comes to this earth for us, lays down his life, comes back to life, and he's even going to return for us. He's not ashamed to call us even his brothers and sisters through the waters of holy baptism. So, key verse to hold on to there in the book of Romans. One other thing to mention, during the season of Epiphany, we are going to be engaged in a sermon series on our epistle readings, appropriate this year as we look at the epistles. During the season of Epiphany, the assigned lectionary epistle readings are all from 1 Corinthians, so we're going to spend some time in 1 Corinthians. That'll begin not this weekend, but the weekend after. God's blessings during your time in his word.